Madam Chair, you are live.
Thank you. So today, January 22nd, 2024, I call to order the Public Works and Utilities Committee. Could I have a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councillor Castro.
Present.
Councillor Michael Garcia.
Present.
Councillor Romero Worth.
Here.
Councillor Lee Garcia.
Here.
Chair Chavez.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Wheeler. Next is approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes from staff?
No changes from staff, Madam Chair.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, could we have a motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? See none, motion passes. Approval of the consent agenda. I believe we have some items removed.
We do, Madam Chair. There were 2 items removed. They were, hold on one second.
I believe it's 6B and 6G. 6B removed by, we get the information.
Madam Chair, I do not know who pulled it. 6B is request for approval of a grant agreement with the State of New Mexico's Tourism Department. And item 6G is request for approval of state price agreement with ITS Quest staffing for the Public Utilities Department.
And both of those items were pulled by Councilwoman Castro. Can I have an approval as amended or a motion as amended?
So moved. Second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? See none, motion passes. Next on our agenda is presentation, informational items. We have an update on the Water Division's asset management plan and implementation. And we have Taylor Durgans, engineer, here to go over that presentation with us. Thank you for being here. Did I come up? There it is. Thank you.
All right, are you all able to hear me? Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Taylor Jurgens. I'm an engineer with the Water Division, and tonight I'll be presenting to you all our asset management plan update for 2024. And first off, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the concept of asset management, I'll just quickly define that for you. Basically, what it is a methodology and a tool set that helps us decide how and where to allocate our resources and money in order to achieve our operational goals and maintain our levels of service for the lowest possible life cycle cost. So really, it's a more strategic way to operate, maintain, and renew our water system. And so why do we need an asset management plan? First and foremost, it helps us do more with our limited resources. That includes both money and our staff's time. It also leads to a more effective operation, maintenance, and planning within the Water Division. Our operations and maintenance approach takes on a much more proactive and preventative methodology, which is a lot more cost effective than the alternative, which is a more reactive, responsive sort of approach. Additionally, asset management has a lot of tools that gives us more data that we can use to help improve our planning for future maintenance, replacement, and rehab costs. So we can kind of plan accordingly and plan ahead on that. It's also quickly becoming the industry standard among medium and large size utilities. And this is primarily because of the cost savings that are incurred by municipalities who take it on. It also helps them do a lot more with the limited resources they have. And more federal and state funding agencies are putting out recommendations and requirements to implement an asset management software in order to be eligible for funding. And that kind of takes me to the next bullet, which is the New Mexico Water Trust Board and SRF program. They've implemented a requirement that municipalities work towards developing an asset management plan in order to be eligible for their funding opportunities. And in response to that, the city adopted Resolution 2015-35, which commits us to building out our asset management program within the Water Division. So here's just a quick overview of some of the asset management practices that we're currently implementing within the Water Division. Back in 2020, FCS and Brown and Caldwell completed an asset management plan and a division-wide assessment of all our assets, excluding BDD. This report included looking at and building out an asset inventory, looking at life cycle costs, performing a risk and criticality assessment on all our assets, as well as building out a long-term funding strategy and a schedule for maintenance and replacement of our assets over our next 30 years. So this is something we're continuing to work on updating and building on. Another program we use every year is our priority line replacement program. And this has a focus on replacing existing water mains in our system, primarily focused on our break history and our asset age. So that's where we target our main replacement. Our source of supply group, who manages our treatment plants and our wells and pump stations, also uses a CMMS software, which is a maintenance management program that helps them to manage the operation, maintenance, and replacement of the assets throughout the Canyon Road treatment plant, the wells, and the pump stations. And finally, we perform regular asset inventory updates in our GIS system anytime we do a main extension, a main replacement, or rehabilitation. And currently, a lot of these live pretty independently of each other. So one of our primary goals is sort of bringing everything together under one umbrella. Now, this is just a highlight of some of our assets in our current water system. You can see we have over 600 miles of mains in our system, over 3,000 hydrants, 9,000 valves, roughly 35 million gallons of storage. And then we've got our reservoirs, our treatment plants, and our well field as well. So we've got a lot of assets, and this is a table taken from our 2020 asset management plan that shows our current replacement value of all those assets. And in 2020, that totaled $800 million. So obviously with high inflation the last few years, the number is likely much higher than that today. Now this is another figure taken from that 2020 report showing the projected rehab and replacement costs of our existing assets over the next 30 years. And you can see this projects an average annual spend of $13.5 million just to upkeep and rehab our existing assets. There's that one large peak, I think it's in 2041. That's resulting from, I think, 3 or 4 storage tanks coming due for replacement in the same year. Obviously, we would see that coming and plan ahead, so we're not taking all that on in a single calendar year. Now, here's a look at the progress we made in 2023 towards our asset management plan build out. Early in the year, we entered into a task order with Hazen and Sawyer, who's one of our on-call engineer consultants, and we brought them on to provide technical support and expertise in our evaluation and selection process for a new asset management software. And under that task order, we completed several preliminary vendor demos to get a sense of what sort of software capabilities and options are out there for us. We also finalized the scope of work and a software requirements list for the vendor we ultimately select, and then develop specific demonstration scenarios and an evaluation matrix that'll be used to make our final selection. So while we didn't select a software in 2023 like we hoped, we made a lot of progress towards getting to the point where we can select, and it sets us up well for 2024. And here's a look at our goals for the year ahead. So starting off, we've renewed our task order with Hazen to provide ongoing technical support for the software selection and then for the implementation stage that follows that. Recently, we've also been increasing our collaboration with divisions within the Public Utilities Department as well as the Public Works Department. So ultimately, our intention is to select a vendor who can accommodate wastewater as well as BDD assets in the future once they decide they're ready to come aboard. And that way we're all kind of under the same umbrella within the Public Utilities Department. And I know Public Works is working through a similar process right now as well. So I've been coordinating with folks over there just to share some insights and see what the possibilities are for potentially aligning on a common software across Public Utilities and Public Works. Looking beyond that, our goal is to complete detailed software demonstrations and then make an ultimate software selection by the end of this fiscal year. As long as we can find a vendor who checks off all the boxes we need. And then once we make that final selection, we enter into the implementation stage, which typically takes 6 to 12 months. So following that timeline, we're hoping we can have some basic functionality in place by about this time next year. That would be our goal. With that, that concludes my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Jurgens. Is there any questions from the committee? Counselor Romero Worth?
Thank you for the presentation. Very helpful. I just want to point out a couple things. So the City of Santa Fe resolution that sort of directs that you do this was passed in 2015, correct? Okay. So it's not because we're now applying to the New Mexico Water Trust Board that we're starting to do this. We've been doing this for a while. I just want to make that point. Okay. And then I think, recently approved money to do a digital twin. And I'm curious how that interfaces with this. And you may not be the right person to ask. So if you aren't the right person to ask, no worries. Just curious, is that something that runs side by side with this? Is it on top of? How does that interface with this work and the asset management plan?
Yeah, I'll do my best to answer it, and John, you can probably chime in here as well. But the digital twin sort of lives above the asset management software, and the asset management software is sort of focused on maintaining and renewing the assets we have. So it's sort of one sector of what we do within the water division, and digital twin is a much broader scope of things. And so from the ones we've looked at, I believe they can interface with our asset management software, but the digital twin goes above and beyond that.
And I mean, does it inform the asset management plan or?
Not necessarily. The digital twin, it can help inform some of our day-to-day decisions and some of our long-term planning. The asset management software sort of informs itself for our management and our rehab of our existing assets. So it's looking internal to itself to sort of make those decisions and looking to the inputs we give it. So the direct asset management scope isn't necessarily informed by the digital twin, but some of the data outputs that come from that asset management software and push up to the digital twin help feed maybe a broader program that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Director Dupuy, did you have anything to add to that? It looked like you were reaching for your mic. No?
Just making sure the question was answered.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Counselor Lee Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Jurgensen. I got some feedback here. Where, it seems that in this direction of our asset management software, or even just our overall asset management, where do we currently see the biggest areas that are problematic where, obviously it's kind of like something's failing, we gotta go fix it. I know the direction that we're headed is to try to revamp our overall system, and be proactive versus reactive.
Mhm.
And I'm guessing, do we have a kind of an idea of where we have the biggest issues and where we foresee us going to be more proactive in replacing some of these areas that are having issues? I guess, I think that's what the whole software would do, but do we have a current view of what that looks like now?
Yeah, so one of the biggest areas that I think this can help us is our main replacement program. So right now, we sort of do a manual assessment based on our brake history, which is one good indicator of where your bad condition mains are. Kind of gets you focused on the right set of pipes. But there's a lot more inputs that go into it than just brake history. The one thing it can help us do is ramp up our main replacement program and target mains we're choosing to replace better. Another area that it's really going to help is our work order management system. Right now, we have a little bit of an outdated work order management approach. And one of the places that these asset management softwares excel is their work order management capabilities and sort of routing work orders, tracking repair and work order history. So it kind of gives you a full picture of how much you're spending on your existing assets, and then you can make bigger decisions based on that. Do I replace it? Do I continue to just rehab it? What's the most cost effective approach?
Regards to the software, you said have we begun the process of identifying softwares that other either municipalities are using? And what would go into our metrics to kind of identify which is going to be the best for our situation in our city, especially being a little older?
Right. Yeah, we have identified, so initially when we brought Hazen on, they have a lot of experience with sort of these asset management softwares and helping other municipalities bring them on board. So they identified several vendors to consider for us, and we brought in a lot of them to do some preliminary demos just to kind of get a feel for them. And we've also looked at some options that are on like price agreement sites or cooperative agreement sites, sort of cross-check those with the ones we've sort of been recommended by our consultant as high quality softwares. We've kind of narrowed down a list of vendors that we've done preliminary demos on that we feel pretty confident have strong capabilities in this.
So this is also on the direction of, for the most part, infrastructure. Is that correct? More infrastructure.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Counselor Garcia. Counselor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Jurgens, for being with us tonight. Just looking over the long-term funding requirements chart. Just for clarification, how do we develop this priority list, especially given that it goes over the next 26 years? And, so how do we develop this?
So a lot of that chart that was built out was developed based on like original construction date of the assets. So like you put a new pump in your pump station, it has sort of an industry standard expected useful life. So that's kind of where you start your replacement life cycle from. So looking back at the age of the pumps, the age of the mains in the system, or the age of the tanks, whatever it is, you sort of get an idea of when that's going to come due based on those industry standard life cycle curves. And then on top of that, you can kind of hone it a little more based on some condition assessments, which it's easier to do on some assets more than others. like on a pump station, you can see all the pumps and valves and fittings that are in the station, but water mains, it's tougher because they're all buried. So where we can, we look at the condition and either extend that life cycle curve or shrink it based on how it's kind of been trending over its life so far. And then you just kind of plot all those out on a graph like that. That's where it just sort of stacks them up. And I think that one was sorted out by asset type. So that's kind of how that chart was developed.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And could this plan be amended?
Yes, it can be.
Okay, and just because, and this was a concern I brought up last year where we got this update, was the major investment that needs to happen in for those big water storage tanks. I think you had mentioned there's 3 of them. And so to appropriately plan, I would think if we can break that over a couple years versus having whomever's in these seats in 2041 saying, well, you've got to figure it out. I think we should be looking towards the future and setting them up for success versus saying, you know, you're going to be in the hole X amount of $1 million. If we could use that kind of, I call it the peanut butter effect of spreading it out over time versus one lump sum, could be helpful to the future governing body. Coupled with that, it looks like that is right around the same time frame where we're going to see a lot of work being done on our water mains. Yes, residents whose water mains are giving them a lot of trouble, they're going to ask, why are we deferring that for 10 years? Let's get some of that work done now. Given some of these aging water mains are sometimes close to 100 years old. I guess those are questions of definitely we don't need to have the answers for, but I'd like for us to maybe potentially revisit this plan and spread this out more over time versus having a big peak effect. For example, with the water mains, you're looking in the mid-30s or 2030s, where who knows what the economy is going to be like then, and to set that expectation that that in that time period, what if the economy is not great? And I don't believe the residents should suffer with failing water mains if this is something we can plan over time. So I guess question is, and maybe this is for Director Dupuy, in regards to federal funding availability. I know there was a major infrastructure bill that passed through Congress a couple of years back. I don't know how much is available still of that, but didn't know if we can look into beginning the process of updating mains, maybe deferring some of the costs that might help us to save for those big water treatment purchases in 10 years, kind of just planning accordingly to spread it all out versus having, those from 2030 to 2045, those are some major costs that the city will be relying on. And again, we don't know what the economy is going to be like. It could be great, but it can also be in a bad space. And I want to make sure we're setting them up for success. So I didn't know if we were looking at federal opportunities to maybe begin some of this work on the front end.
Madam Chair, I'm Councilor Garcia. We actually do an incredible job obtaining additional funding to supplement the expenses of the utility. And we have someone that helps with grant applications. We do a regular review of all our upcoming grants and have someone that helps organize and focus on those applications and the process associated with it, including on occasion hiring specialists like the prior state engineer, John D'Antonio, to help guide us through interactions with the Army Corps of Engineers and his expertise at having had experience working there, so we can be more successful in navigating the process, because it's not always very straightforward. So we put a significant amount of effort into accomplishing that, and it does subsidize to a significant extent and help smooth out those expenses. And additionally, we've looked at how this software could help us analyze alternatives than the typical. And one thing that we've noticed is we go to do a rehab because it's old enough to be warranted to do that repair, and then it ends up being in great shape. And so we're looking at ways to incorporate some mass assessment to then help us realize where that rehab may not be needed, and it can come off of the projections that we do that help build into what rates we need to charge. So that's something we put a lot of attention towards, is not having to increase rates and being creative to ensure that we're being efficient with taxpayer funds.
Gotcha. Thank you, Director. I appreciate that. And then just a quick follow-up on the kind of and the investment that we're planning on for 24 on this chart. We don't plan to invest as little as we are for the next 26 years. Hard to kind of put a number on this. It's from my reading of the chart, it's $4 million. It doesn't give you a specific, but every single figure beyond for the next 26 years looks at least $7 million or more, which is double potentially what we're investing this year. So I guess why? Why is that? And again, I don't know if it's based off this chart, that's what we're investing, but the need is there. I think it's evident that the need is there. So my question is, why such a little investment in out of this 30-year plan we've got? This is the third lowest. So it's surprised given some of the major challenges we've seen and the aging infrastructure that's ahead of us. So don't know if that's more so maybe a comment, I think, but I know don't feel free to respond, but I mean, I think we can, there's a lot of investment that needs to be done. And because if you look at it, 24 is, like I said, a little over, it's hard to gauge from this chart, under 5. Next year, we're going to jump up to nearly 10 million. So things that immediately jump into mind is capacity issue. Nearly double the work. Budgetary. How are we planning to budget for that? And then lastly, looking at is what initially planned the immediate need, because that will then get me into my next question, which is the wastewater treatment plant. And I don't believe, is that a factor in these charts? So I think that is a huge curveball that could be thrown at these figures. And so if maybe we can explain a little more how that might be factoring into this long-term funding requirements and investments in the infrastructure.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, the wastewater plant will be part of the same assessment or similar that occurs for wastewater, because they're two separate funds. That planning is done separately, and the revenues needed to cover those expenses obviously end up with separate rate structures to then support being able to provide for those expenses. But in terms of the specifics, if you don't mind pulling up the slide. So this is really just a projection. Often we end up spending some varying amount relative to that. And it's because projects often take some extended period of time. Often this look at when some rehab occurs will take the project costs and put it in a year or a short time period. That varies greatly. And so like Nichols rehab project, $17 million project. And we'll do a predominant amount the expenditure next year. So for, depending on when something kicks off, those numbers shift significantly, but we've budgeted and collected revenue sufficient to cover those expenses, even though they vary when they actually occur. And often it is a capacity issue. In fact, the average annual is 13.5 million. The average annual, if we were obtaining a 50-year life cycle recovery, we would be spending more. So ultimately, we have capacity issues that we are trying to address so that we can do more rehab on an annual basis.
Thank you, Director Dupuy. You brought up a question that I had, but I definitely want to just maybe I want to clarify. So the wastewater treatment plant is not part of this chart? Okay, and the wastewater, the Canyon Road waste treatment plant is, and I think that's, why is one treatment plant part of this funding and one not?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, it's just the separation of the funds. One's a water treatment plant, so it stays within funding from the Water Enterprise Fund. And one is wastewater, so it pulls from the wastewater enterprise fund.
Okay, thank you. And then you, your comments earlier kind of touched on a question that I forgot to ask, what's around the fiscal year 23 allocations. And did we, right now it's, again, it's hard to understand what we planned for there, but it was over 5 million. Did we spend all of that? Did we allocate all of that? How much costs might be deferred till this year? Just wanting to get a kind of better understanding of where we were last year, what carries over to this year, what might potentially carry over to the next year.
In terms of the funding projected on this chart on the screen here.
Yeah, so in 2023, you know, for example, and I'm just looking at the color coded way it's color coded. So it looks like there was going to be a lot of work done on wells. Maybe hydro generate. It's a little hard because it's
Storage tanks.
okay. So I guess my question is, did we get all that work done that we planned for 23?
I would have to look back at the exact projects they have in that 2023 projection. I know, as John alluded to, projects shift forward and back depending on sort of the engineering timescale and all that. And additionally, what's not included on this list are like our larger capital projects, like the Nichols Dam rehab, or like the upcoming Lock Said project at the water treatment plant. So sometimes we have to make some shifts in what's maybe projected on the rehab and renewal of our assets, sort of make room or prioritize those larger capital projects as well.
Okay. Thank you. Really appreciate that. With that, thank you, Mr. Jurgens. Thank you, Director Dupuy. Really appreciate the clarification. No other questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Castro.
Yes, and I will try to be. There we go. I've had a couple questions from constituents about the efficiency of our water system and our infrastructure. So I would love to see a compare and contrast when we do get the new software, just to be sure that we are going in the right direction, and just include a little bit of the water loss through the system and also through evaporation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. And I actually wanted to go back to the presentation, the similar graph. So when you were doing the presentation, Mr. Jurgens, you said that it seems like you guys are already having discussions that kind of address Counselor Garcia's concern about noting where we have high cost, and you're already having the discussions on how do we stretch that out a little bit. I feel like when this presentation occurs in next year, that might be information that would be good for us to have if those conversations are taking place. What are the plans in addressing those as your team kind of goes through it? 'Cause it sounds like those discussions are occurring, correct?
Yes, they are occurring on, we're not necessarily looking out at 2041, for example, for those storage tanks. But those type of discussions occur on maybe a closer time scale. We're constantly prioritizing projects and things like that.
And I think it would be good for the committee to have insight on how those discussions occur so that we could assist in regards to budget and so on and so forth, and making sure that we're supporting things appropriately. So I think that thought process would be really insightful to us, and to be part of this presentation next year, even if it's like the next 5 years, 10 years, this is how we're making it work, how we're stretching it so it's actually achievable and we, are accomplishing the things that need to be done. I think would be important for the committee to know about. I also just had one question, which was, on slide 4, you talked about all of those things kind of working independently and that you guys are discussing the importance of bringing everything together. I just wanted to know if you could elaborate on that a little bit and like what the benefits of that would be.
Yeah, so what that might look like, once we get an asset management software in place, that brings all the sections within the water division into a common software. Right now, Source of Supply uses, Antero is the CMMS software they use, but it's only them using it, and our transmission distribution group has their own separate way of going about their maintenance practices and things like that. And then similarly, our engineering section has our priority line replacement program, but that sort of just lives within our engineering section, and we're informed by folks in the transmission distribution group, but it's not sort of wrapped up into one nice software package. So what this new software would look like is we'd have one software, Source of Supply would work off of it, T&D would work off of it, our engineering section would use it in our main replacement and rehab program. And all of that would then report back up. You can make a dashboard, you can see here's how much money we're spending on maintenance in this area or this area. It just makes reporting a lot easier. It makes tracking a lot easier. And so just bringing everyone into a centralized.
Increases efficiency.
Yep.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Director Dupuy, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Oh,
could I just ask
oh yeah.
a couple quick questions?
Mhm.
So I just want to make sure everybody understands this asset management plan is for the infrastructure necessary to deliver water to the community solely. Okay. And the Canyon Road plant is not a wastewater treatment plant. It's a water treatment plant.
Correct.
Okay. And on your slide with the long-term funding requirements, you have that line going across that says average 13.5 million. You're taking the average based on the overall replacement cost, or how did you get to, over the next, whatever it is, 30 years, on average, we're going to have to spend about 13.5 million, correct?
Yep. So that number was calculated looking out. They basically charted all the replacement projects or renewal projects that are scheduled to come due between 2020, when the report was finalized, and 2050, which is the 30-year outlook.
Does that go back to the slide on the previous page? Total asset value? Are you using those numbers?
It's a portion of that. So
Okay.
it doesn't assume we're replacing every asset in our system in that next 30 years.
Yeah.
It looks at the assets that are set to come due for replacement in the next 30 years based on sort of the life cycle projections and condition analysis that they did. So there's assets included in this 800 million that are scheduled for replacement beyond that 2050 date. So they wouldn't fall within this.
This time period.
Correct.
So the things that we're going to need to replace, on average, we're going to need to spend about $13.5 million a year in order to provide for them.
That's correct, based on the projections from that report.
Right. And so really this graph is sort of showing the age of the infrastructure and when it might be in need of being replaced, not necessarily that that's the year we're going to replace it.
Right, yeah, this is simply a projection, so water main, you project out to fail in 2040. It
Right.
doesn't mean it's gonna fail and we need to replace it in
Right.
2040. That's a sort of a
Guesstimate. Best.
educated guess.
Yeah.
Based on the data we have, so
Yeah, and there may be factors that cause us to have to do repairs sooner or that push out the horizon. But on balance, we know that based on the water delivery infrastructure system that we have, these are kind of the ages of the different components and, just kind of planning. This is the time horizon, these are the kinds of costs, but and to keep up with it, we're gonna really need to be spending something around 13.5 million.
Right, yep. It's a planning tool. It's not a sort of a prescriptive
Right.
year-to-year project list. This is approximately when you're gonna need to look at replacing these assets. That could shift forward or backward, like you said. But it gives us an idea of what we're looking at ahead of us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Counselor Marowart, thank you for those questions. I think they were very clarifying. And thank you, Mr. Jurgens, for being here today. All right, so we're gonna move to items pulled off consent. And Director Wheeler, if I miss anything, let me know. But our first item was 6B, request for approval of grant program agreement with the State of New Mexico's Tourism Department and the amount of $147,437 to support initiatives to manage vegetation and litter. This comes with a bar request to allocate funding in the amount of $147,437 for professional services to support the goals of the grant program. And we have Director McDonald from Parks and Open Space to discuss this item. So do you want to start the presentation or would you like to ask your questions? Counselor Castro?
Sure. Thank you so much, Director, for being here. Really, I just wanted some more clarification about where some of these programs are going to be. And in particular, I think that I would like to know more about the trash pickup because we've been having some conversations with constituents about the need. And so I just want a little overview of how that's going to look.
Madam Chair, Councilors, thank you for the question. This is an exciting grant opportunity that we have with the State Tourism Department. It's going to be complementing the City Parks and Open Space litter pickup initiative. We do have crews that pick up in the city, but we have lots of other things to do. And one of the areas of overlap that we have come to find is that this need for beautification at our gateways. So this is really going to focus litter pickup at Cerrillos, Southern Cerrillos, St. Francis Drive, and St. Michael's, and then as assigned. So, but that's going to be regular pickups in these areas, and we hope to have significant impact. This is going to be working with our park ranger crew, who is also in charge of some of our encampment cleanups and just tidiness as a whole. And we're hoping to help reach out to the community and let them know what we're doing and encouraging them to join into our beautification efforts.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And that would have been my suggestion as well, to reach out. There are different organizations in some of these gateway areas that might be willing to help. So thank you so very much. I appreciate you understanding that Parks is taking on a big job with these encampments. And so I really like hearing that it's going to be focused in some of these areas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions for Director McDonald?
Move to approve.
Second.
Right, I have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please? Director Wheeler?
So sorry, Madam Chair. We're trying to look at the next item. A roll call for the item on the Parks Grant, Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
and Chair Chavez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Director McDonald. Okay, we're going to move to the next item, and I think there is some discussion from staff that we need here. Item 6G, Regina, Director Wheeler, do you want to?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm so sorry, but staff does now have a change to the agenda. The caption for this item is not exactly correct, nor are the attachments. And so with Counselor Dupuy's consent, we recommend removing this item from the agenda, and you'll see it at Finance Committee and then at Governing Body as a discussion item.
And Counselor Castro did pull it, so I just want to check in with her.
I would like to have an opportunity to see it in this committee if possible, but I do understand that it needs to be dealt with in a timely fashion, so I would concede yes.
Madam Chair, I wonder if, and even we even have our person who knows the rules here, is it possible to have a discussion and then have the last action here tonight be postponement or a removal or something?
We could move it forward without recommendation, but I'm not sure how.
Option's completely incorrect.
Okay, well, that's a problem. That's like a.
Yeah, I would
That's
say,
like something we can't fix here.
and we wouldn't even want to discuss it, I think, if the caption is incorrect because it's just misinforming the public.
Yeah, so I think we can't.
Madam Chair, quick clarifying question. Is this time sensitive?
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, it is.
So it couldn't wait until next Public Works and Utilities meeting?
That's correct.
But we will see it at governing body for final approval. So it could be pulled there and discussed.
Correct.
It actually has to be on discussion at Governing Body since it won't have been heard at Public Works Committee.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So can,
Chair,
yes,
if I can make a suggestion, I know it's an extra meeting, but if you want to attend finance, you can also ask your questions at finance if you want to.
Or yeah, that's a great opportunity. Thank you, Counselor.
all right, so how do
So-
we do this? Do we revisit our motion to approve the agenda? We approved the agenda, so.
Yeah, we've never done this.
Madam Chair, I think we need to revisit the agenda and remove this item because we can't consider it given the caption is incorrect. If the caption was correct, we can move it forward with no
Mhm.
recommendation, but we can't take action on incorrect item.
So could you tell me our approval, who was our motion and our second for approval of the agenda?
Madam Chair, Counselor Romero Worth made the motion to approve the agenda and Counselor Lee Garcia seconded it.
Yeah, I think you'd have to withdraw.
Well, or can we just amend the agenda now? Can we just move to take this off the agenda now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. So I would move to remove item 6G from tonight's agenda because the caption is incorrect for the packet materials.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
and Chair Chavez.
Yes,
Motion passes, Madam Chair.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we don't have any action items. No executive session. Next is matters from staff. So Director Wheeler, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I don't have any matters from staff at this time.
Great, thank you. Director Dupuy, any matters?
No matters at this time.
All right, thank you. Matters from the committee. Counselor Michael Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick request for Director Dupuy, if we can maybe get an update from utility billing on how that conversion is going, successes, challenges, that way we can make sure that we're providing as much support to that team as possible. So maybe a future presentation topic.
And is that something you wanted at Public Works or could it be the governing body?
I think Public Works is sufficient. I mean, if governing body deems it's appropriate, we can also do that, but I think having one at this committee is sufficient for right now.
And one of the reasons I was maybe trying to differentiate, we have the consultant who is the program manager that we hired um, I don't remember the exact month, but 6 months ago approximately. And she's available that we could schedule something at the governing body, which is coming up. She'll still be in town. If that, or we could schedule it. I don't know if she'll be in the next public works. She comes for 2 weeks at a time. So it might be a month if that's okay, if we
Maybe
want to
Zoom?
come back to public works.
Could Zoom be an option perhaps for a presentation as well?
I think for her first, she had specifically requested to be able to present in person.
And so if we work with her schedule to do an in-person, because once we start talking governing body, we've got to start talking with other entities outside of us to determine what the makeup of that agenda looks like. So I think for
Sure.
time being, let's start here, work with her schedule when she's in, she'll meet with us, and then we can move forward from there.
I will schedule it for the next one that she's in town.
Okay. Thank you, Director. I appreciate that.
Any other matters? What I wanted to say is, I really want to hear from committee members about presentations, requested presentations. I want us to use this time to be as informative to council members, but also to the public as much as possible. I like when we have information at these meetings, because when I have concerns from constituents, I think it's really effective to like refer them to these meetings. It promotes their participation in that, and the information's all there. So it's just it could become a good resource if we utilize them effectively. You all will help me do that. So please request presentations as you see would be appropriate. And then I could work with staff to make those things happen. All right, and our next meeting is Monday, February 5th, 2024.